So I'm already getting a little suspicious. Well, then I start looking at the arrest reports, and each arrest report was written as an independent arrest report because they were unrelated. So they never got read together.
Okay.
Each one was reviewed and approved by itself, probably by different supervisors.
Okay.
But when I read the 5, each one was the same.
Oh.
We were on patrol. We turned the corner. He looked surprised. He threw the cocaine down. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. I went to the next report. We turned the corner. He looked surprised. He threw the cocaine down. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And so
kind of copy and paste.
Very much so. And I had worked narcotics. I worked patrol for a long time, and there were times. There's 1 or 2 times in my career where I turned the corner and he looked surprised and he threw the cocaine, and it happened that way. But you know what? It doesn't happen that way all the time.
No.
There's always some kind of a variation, you know?
Well, not 5 times on one drive.
Correct.
Welcome to the Hey Chaplain podcast. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. This podcast exists so that cops can hear encouragement from other cops. You might not talk directly to a police chaplain, but I'm hoping that at 4:30 in the morning as the night shift is slowing down, you might listen to a chaplain talk to other cops about being a wiser, healthier person. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are giving you the wisdom gleaned from their experiences so that you don't have to learn the hard way. Today, Ward Jenkins is joining us again. I was wanting to do an episode, not specifically on internal affairs because I have another plan for that, but an episode generally about officer integrity. I knew that Ward had a good story on that topic, and also that he was adjacent to the famous Rampart Corruption Scandal in LA 20 years ago. So I knew that Ward could specifically speak about cops throwing away their career, or worse, for short-term gain. Listen, there's no greater danger to your career than compromise. This is an area you absolutely have to get right. So without further ado, here's Ward Jenkins. Ward, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Jared. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm always doing great when I get a chance to sit down and talk to you.
Thank you.
I enjoy chatting with you, and I love dipping my toe into all the experience that you've had as both an officer and as a chaplain. So can you tell me, just like the briefest overview, what was the Rampart scandal in Los Angeles back in the day?
So Rampart was a corruption case, and they were falsifying arrest reports, and they were planting cocaine and making arrests that way. And ultimately, they were caught. A couple of them went to prison, and it was huge because anytime you've got corruption in a police department that's beyond 1 or 2 guys, it's going to be a big story. Mm-hmm. So that's something that happened in L.A. Rampart is a division that's just to the west of downtown. There's a freeway that separates Central Division, which is downtown, and that's where I was working at the time with Rampart. Literally, you go onto the freeway, you're in Rampart, you go on the other side, you're in Central. So,
okay. It's planting evidence, but Rampart has become synonymous with police corruption because at least for a couple of those individuals, it kind of escalated and it went from planting evidence to getting kind of out of control.
Yeah.
They were involved in some criminal. There were some shootings and stuff, I think.
There's some pretty serious stuff that was going on as a result. So, and I think, back in the 70s, LAPD had a burglary scandal. I don't even know if you're aware of that, but
I don't think so.
We had officers that they went into a window smash, a store got window smashed. They went in and then they're sitting in there and all of a sudden they get the idea that they can probably take stuff and no one will ever know. And it went from that to they actually were working the alarm response car in Hollywood Division, and they would pick a store that they wanted to get stuff from and use a slingshot, break the window, the alarm would ring, the radio call would come out, and they would buy the radio call. Hey, this is 6 Zebra so-and-so, the alarm car. We will handle that alarm.
Yeah.
Show us on scene. Hey, we need a responsible party to show up. There's been a break in here. And now they've got 20 or 30 minutes to load their car up with stereo equipment or what.
Yeah.
And so that was back in the 70s, and that was probably the last big corruption case that LAPD had gone through until this one, which would have been in the 90s with Rampart. And very different. but similar in the sense that at the core of it is the officer's integrity.
Yeah.
You know, that's at the core of all of this. And the guys that were responsible for the burglary stuff in Hollywood made a training tape they showed at roll calls, and one of the officers said that it all started with a pack of gum for him, that he swiped a pack of gum when he was in a store one time, and then that was sort of the beginning of the cascade that he could get away with it. And I don't know. I had a little trouble with that. My principles are, you know, a thief is a thief and stealing is a stealing. So I don't know. I think you just need to say, hey, I was a thief and I got caught. And I had something that sort of mimicked the Rampart stuff, but it happened in Central Division.
Yeah, kind of parallel. So Rampart's going on,
so
but,
Rampart actually,
it's not news yet.
Rampart had not broke. I knew nothing about Rampart.
Ah, okay.
So none of us even knew Rampart existed. Now
The scandal.
The
I had
scandal.
no idea the scandal existed. Yeah.
Now, certain people in our internal affairs division knew that it was going on and what was coming down the pike. It just hadn't made it outside of that. Probably the chief knew, and the commanding officer of internal affairs knew, and that was it. So we had a couple of officers in downtown LA that got a complaint against them from an individual who said that they falsely arrested him for possession of cocaine. A very small amount of cocaine, a little tiny piece of cocaine. But he said they planted it on him and it was a false arrest. And he actually pled guilty at his court case.
Okay.
And then he came over and made the complaint that he was falsely arrested. So
But it doesn't add up.
it doesn't add up. And initially there was a supervisor assigned to investigate it. And I think he sat on it for like 9 months. We have about a year to bring these things to, we have actually 1 year exactly, 365 days to timestamp something and get it in, or we lose the ability to adjudicate it beyond a paper penalty.
Okay.
So my partner was, the supervisor who was investigating this retired. He just absolutely, one day I quit. And I feel like he knew where it was headed, and that's why he walked. He just didn't want to do it. That's what I feel. I've never asked him that.
Right.
So we got it. My partner got that. I caught a bunch of other cases, and we would kind of triage our cases and look at them and see which ones we needed to get to first. And this one didn't seem like it was a big deal because the guy had pled guilty. And so my partner had sat on it for a little while, and one day I was in the administrative office in Central, and he came in and said, "Hey, Ward, can you come in and take a look at some paperwork for me? I'm looking at this case." I said, "Sure." So I walked down to the conference room, and there's a big conference table, and he's got papers and reports all spread out, you know. And so I start at the very beginning, and it's the court docket, and I say, possession of cocaine. He pled guilty. And my partner says, "Yep." I said, "Oh, okay." So then I picked up the officer's log that they had filled out, the log of activities and how the flow of sequence for how the arrest took place. And it just looked a little odd to me.
Okay.
And it looked odd to me because they made 5 unrelated arrests, one after the other. Like they made the first arrest, and then they got another one, and they got another. They got 5 on the way to the station. And I thought that was odd because normally, look, I have arrested someone and turned a corner and driven into something else and then made a second arrest. That can happen.
That can happen.
But when you hit 5, something's wrong. So I'm already getting a little suspicious. Well, then I start looking at the arrest reports, and each arrest report was written as an independent arrest report because they were unrelated. So they never got read together.
Okay.
Each one was reviewed and approved by itself, probably by different supervisors.
Okay.
But when I read the 5, each one was the same.
Oh.
We were on patrol. We turned the corner. He looked surprised. He threw the cocaine down. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. I went to the next report. We turned the corner. He looked surprised. He threw the cocaine down. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And so
kind of copy and paste.
Very much so. And I had worked narcotics. I'd worked patrol for a long time, and there were times, there was 1 or 2 times in my career where I turned the corner and he looked surprised and he threw the cocaine, and it happened that way. But you know what? It doesn't happen that way all the time.
No.
There's always some kind of a variation, you know?
Well, not 5 times on one drive.
Correct. Yeah. So we knew that something was wrong, and it looked bad. And this was going to turn into, because this is now courtroom testimony.
Yeah.
This is perjury. This is false arrest, possibly. So we went into our lieutenant. Within 5 minutes, he was like, "Oh my gosh!" He called the captain. I'm sending Jenkins and his partner in. So we go down to the captain's office. Within 5 minutes, he goes, "Oh my gosh!" And he calls the deputy chief. And he says, "I'm sending 2 sergeants down to talk to you about this." And so we get down to the deputy chief, and within 5 minutes, he says, "Oh my gosh!" And he calls up the commanding officer at Internal Affairs, and he says, "I'm sending a couple of guys over to talk to you, and we got problems." And so he goes, "Okay." So he goes, "You go." He's ready for you. So we drive down to Internal Affairs. We go into the captain's office there. He's got his lieutenant there and a couple sergeants, and we lay it all out. And we're expecting the same response. In fact, before we left, our deputy chief had said, "Look, this is going to turn into a task force. This is going to. One of you is going to have to go on loan to IA. It'll probably be your partner because he'd been a detective before, but they'll work that out. But this is going to be a problem." Well, when we get to Internal Affairs, we tell our story, and there's just kind of silence around the room. And they kind of look at each other, and then the captain says, "We think you guys can handle this." And so we gathered up our paperwork, and we're like, "Oh, okay." And we left, and we were asking ourselves, what just happened? We're walking back to the car. Like everyone we talked to was like red alarm, ringing the bell. This is an issue. And all of a sudden we've been told that we're going to handle this. Like, this is way out of our depth. This is something that.
So IA was unimpressed by this. Everyone else was shocked.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this is fishy. This is an obvious problem.
Yeah. But
IA is just not.
And it wasn't until I literally like 4 weeks later, we were running with this thing hard, that the news broke of the Rampart Corruption Scandal. Our division bordered Rampart. And so I think the CO at IA and probably the chief of police didn't want these 2 cases being investigated by IA at the same time, because then
Didn't want them connected.
Even though they weren't. The appearance would have been that they could have been.
Right.
And they weren't. They really weren't. Anyway, so that's how we ended up with this case. So we had a very short time frame to track down 5 arrestees in downtown LA, all of whom were homeless. So we had individuals A through E who had been arrested, and we found A through E. Of course, A was the guy. Let's say A was the guy who made the complaint. So he was enrolled in a mission. He was actually becoming a chaplain.
Really?
He'd found Jesus. He'd gone sober. Yeah, and he had a very credible story. And so we asked him, "Wait, you pled guilty? What happened?" He goes, I was in jail. The trial came. It was a hung jury. They kept me in custody. They were going to retry me. And finally the DA's office, the DA came in and said, "Look, if you just plead guilty, you can walk out of jail today." And he said, "I've been in jail for like 90-something days." He goes, I was ready to get out. So I just signed the deal, walked out. And it says, I walked out of jail and I walked over here and made the complaint. So now there's a little credibility onto why he pled guilty, and what it was all about. But he was absolutely insistent that this was a false arrest and they planted the cocaine. But now we have his word versus the officers, and that's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So the investigation has to go into individuals B through E. We found individual B, and he was kind of like very, I hate cops. I'm not going to talk to you.
Right.
We found C, and he said, "Yeah, that's what happened. But that's what happened. And you know what? I'll cooperate with that. The same thing happened to me. They planted the cocaine on me. Look, I was a cokehead at the time, but if I had had any cocaine, I'd have been smoking it. I wouldn't have been walking down the street with it."
Right.
Okay? That was his exact...
That's fair.
That's what he said. And it had a ring of truth to it. In fact, A told us, look, I was a cokehead. He told us the same thing independently. And these guys, they didn't know each other. They weren't 5 guys that hung out together.
Right.
We established that through our investigation. They all were in different parts of downtown and Skid Row at different times. But these 2 individuals told us the same thing. Look, if I'd had cocaine, I would have smoked it. So C was cooperative. D was, yeah, it happened, but I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
E was in prison. We flew up to Northern California, interviewed him. Yes, it happened. I'm doing time for it. It was wrong. But you know what? I'm cleaning up now. I hate cops. Go away. So we're left with A and C but that's enough. We have corroborating evidence at this point.
I'm a little bit surprised that people who are antagonistic toward law enforcement wouldn't want to help an IA-type investigation.
Yeah.
They just don't want to help at all.
They just don't. Yeah, they want nothing to do with us.
Okay.
So I think that's the overriding, sentiment there. So we got this thing finished and in before the year expired, and the officers were sent to a Board of Rights. And so now the Board of Rights has started And we have he's the guy, the original complainant, and he's 4 months further into the chaplain training program. He's 7 months sober. He's great. He's a great witness. But we don't have C. So the board, and we've been looking for C, but we can't find him. So the day one ends of the board and at 5 p.m, and my partner and I drive around Skid Row until midnight looking for C. And we show his picture. We know where he hangs out. Everybody tells us the same thing. I know who that is. I haven't seen him for, a couple months, maybe 3 months. We get different stories, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, something like that. Everybody tells us, yeah, I know who that is, but I haven't seen him. So we go into the next day. The board it's running. It's on. The case is moving forward. And we know if we can't find C, we're going to lose the case. We know that. So my partner says, Ward, I'm going in the board and I'm going to tap dance. You got to find this guy.
Okay.
I'm like, okay. So all I can do is what any investigator does is you go around to all of the known locations where this individual would frequent. We have interview cards built up over a course of years of this guy. We know exactly he's at this hotel, he's at this corner, he's at this mission.
Yeah. And
I go back to the same places we were the night before and have the same results. So it's about 10:30 in the morning, and I pulled my car over. We had a Central Police Station is this giant brick building that it takes up an entire city block. There's no windows or anything. And I pulled up on the one side, on the west side of it, and stopped. And I was facing 5th Street, which is a one-way street. Skid Row, life on the nickel, life on 5th Street. That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
And so I'm just looking at 5th Street. I'm looking at the homeless people and the street people, and there's businesses there too. And I'm sitting there and I pull over, and for one of the first times in my life, I actually started to pray on duty because I was so frustrated. And I said, God, I believe you gave me this case for a reason. I believe these guys should not be cops. I really believe that their integrity has failed and that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And I believe that you've given us this case, but I'm stuck. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm just crying out to you right now. Of course, this is all silent. I'm just saying this prayer in my head. I'm crying out to you for help. Please. And I look across the street, and I am not kidding. C is walking down the street.
Yeah.
And I still get kind of chills when I think about it. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I throw the car in drive. I pull over. It's a one-way street. I come to a stop. I scare the life out of him. He jumps back because he's like an unmarked police car just pulled up. And I jump out and I go, Mr. C, do you remember me? Do you remember me? And he looks at me and he goes, oh, you're that detective that interviewed me. I go, yeah, I'm Sergeant Jenkins. And I talked to you about the arrest you had for the cocaine. Do you remember? He goes, yeah, I remember. I go, would you be willing to testify at a hearing about what the officers did? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm just trying to get to the mission to put my stuff in a locker over there. Well, come get in the car. I'll take you over there, So I put him in the car. We start driving to the mission, and we get his stuff checked. I go in and meet with the mission people, and I check his stuff into a locker. And now we're headed down to the building where the Board of Rights is in process, And I said, Mr. C, where have you been? I've been looking for you everywhere. He says, well, about 8 weeks ago, I checked myself into an alcohol rehab center over in Rampart, over across the freeway.
Yeah.
And it was a private. We checked every public known place to check for this. We checked the morgue. We checked the hospital. We were looking for this guy.
Yeah.
He didn't exist because he went to a privately funded, probably grant money or something, and he was just in their program, but there's no reporting of it.
Right.
He goes, I've been in there about 8 weeks. He goes, and this morning at like 4:30, I just woke up and something told me that I should leave. I got up and I got my stuff together and I started walking. And he said, I was walking all the way up into the point where you just stopped me.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this is God's honest truth, So I show up and I walk him down the hallway at the Board of Rights, and they're all meeting in there. And everybody turns around to stare at me. Mm-hmm. And the two officers, their eyes just got real big because they knew who I was bringing.
Yeah.
And my partner came in at the lunch break right after that, and he says, where did you find him? I go, you'll never believe it.
Yeah, that's a whole story.
I'll tell you. I can't tell you now. And then the officers, they resigned.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Mr. C never even testified. That was it.
They knew to get out.
That was it. Yep, yeah. They were done. And so, that was one of those things where I did not do a joy dance over that.
No.
I didn't. No. I didn't feel. I felt like I did what I was supposed to do, and I felt like what happened as it was supposed to happen. But I really, really felt bad for those two officers. They had families, they had mortgages. It was all coming to an end.
Yeah.
It was a hard thing, but it just drove home to me, the whole thing about integrity. And these guys weren't stealing money. They weren't getting anything out of this that you would normally associate with corruption. What they were getting out of it was reputation.
Right.
They had a reputation of making a lot of dope arrests, and at some point they were going to be able to go to a narcotics division arm of LAPD and say, look, we've made...
Because they've been falsifying how much work they were getting done.
Yes, but they're high producers.
Right.
They're making a bunch of big time narcotics arrests. So that's something.
And they're targeting people who are problematic, these homeless men who most of them were addicts.
Right.
And so they probably felt like there's no victim here.
That's right.
I look good. Bad people get put in jail for 90 days.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the truth is, in our profession, in the law enforcement profession, we always talk about officer safety, and we always talk about tactics, and we always talk about that. But truly, ethics cause more officers to lose their jobs than in the line of duty deaths ever will.
Yeah.
By far.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about career survival, this is a big topic. I had a professor, he told the classroom a story, and it was about a guy who was driving down the street, and he saw a prostitute walk along the street, and he pulled up and he said, "Hey, will you give me your services for $1 million?" And he opened up a briefcase and he had $1 million. She goes, "Yeah." And so then he said, "Okay, will you give me your services for $2?" And she says, "No, what do you think I am?" And he said, "We've already established what you are.
Yes.
We're just talking about price now." And it was his way of conveying that integrity was important.
Yeah, he stole that from Churchill and Lady Astor, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
There's an actual exchange in history.
Is there?
Yeah. So
how funny.
He wasn't as original as you thought he was.
No, just to me.
No, but it's a clever thing to point out that people are willing to compromise their integrity for the right price.
Right.
And that's a sad commentary.
And as a young narcotics cop, Jared, we took down a house, a rock cocaine house one day, and we couldn't find the money. We found the cocaine. We knew there had to be money there because our undercovers had gone in and spent money. And I went out the back door, and there was a crawl space. It was a crawl space access, or kind of a raised foundation, and there were no cobwebs over the crawl space. And so I thought, that's odd.
Yeah.
So I crawled under there, and I shimmied along into the house. I had my flashlight, and I came face to face with like $35,000 in cash. And I'll be completely honest with you and tell you that a part of me thought about grabbing a handful of that money and shoving it down inside my ballistic vest, which would have been $1,000 or $2,000, and then recovering the rest. But I absolutely remembered that professor's story, and I remembered the illustration, and that he was trying to drive home that integrity has no price. Integrity is something you have to maintain no matter what. Yeah. And I just started to yell, "Hey, I need someone down here! I got money! I got money!"
Yeah.
So it scared me a little.
Sometimes in any group, including a group of officers, there's pressure to make little compromises, cut little corners. Like, this is how we know you're one of us. This is how you know you're one of the team. This is your initiation. This is what gets you trusted, is that you'll make these little compromises. How do you resist that if you're brand new to a shift? Maybe you're a rookie officer. How do you maintain your integrity when people around you are people of compromised integrity, and they'd like you to compromise your integrity a little bit?
One of the conversations I have with officers when I'm on ride-alongs is, remember, you are not self-employed. Look, even I'm a volunteer chaplain, but I have to subscribe to what my department wants me to do.
Yeah.
Ethically and every other way.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to do that, then I should quit.
Yeah.
You have to understand, if you cut a corner because someone else wanted you to, is it worth you losing your job for?
Yeah.
Did we just see this with George Floyd and all the officers that acquiesced? We have the one officer who had the knee in the back that was the main culprit, but he was surrounded by other officers who could have intervened and said, "Hey, man, get off of him. Let's sit him up the way we're supposed to. We're not supposed to handcuff people face down." That's been known since the 80s. Everyone has to decide for themselves who the person in the mirror is.
Yeah.
But I think integrity is integrity. And, there were times in my career when I pulled officers off of suspects when I didn't. Hey, this isn't right.
Yeah.
And those officers came back to me later and thanked me. They thanked me for being a restraining force that kept them out of trouble. Yeah. Did it make me popular? I have no idea. Maybe not.
No, but let's not contribute.
Correct.
Each of these officers has a conscience, we
Right.
hope.
Right.
Each of these officers has a line that they used to subscribe to.
Correct.
So let's be the one that reminds them of that. Let's be the one
Right.
that help them be a better version of themselves and not make mistakes that they can't come back from.
That's right.
And certainly not join in.
Right.
And so, but boy, there's a lot of pressure.
There is a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure even in certain circles. I know back in my day, and this won't make LAPD sound great, but if you wanted to get into Metropolitan Division or SWAT, you had to be a guy that went drinking with the guys after
Right.
work. You had to be. And if you didn't do that, you were never accepted.
Yeah, there's lots of agencies that have little subcultures, little
Right.
cliques.
Right.
We're going to go out and carouse. We're going to go out and drink. We're
Right.
going to go do whatever. And that may compromise what you feel like you are as a person, but you feel like you're pressured into it because everyone important is doing this.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So if you're in an agency that's sideways, man, I'd say get out and find one that's good.
Yeah.
We take for granted. That's the other thing I see when I'm on ride-alongs is no patrol cops like internal affairs.
Yeah.
But I ask them the question, and I'm not going to name specific agencies now, but there are agencies that exist today where uniformed officers are committing murders and armed robberies on duty and dealing cocaine out of their police cars and that kind of thing. And so the question is, is that the agency you want to work for?
Yeah.
How terrible would that be knowing your partner was that sideways that they could just go in and murder somebody? And how do you trust them to back,
Yeah.
Anyway, so
You may need to consider moving your family and getting out,
Yeah.
going somewhere else.
yeah.
Yeah.
But for my guys that I'm with, I want to remind them that we're that way for a reason,
Yes.
and let's keep it that way.
Thank you, Ward.
Oh, thank you for the time.
I really appreciate Ward coming in to talk to me. He was in my neighborhood for another meeting, and he graciously agreed to come into my office to record his experiences about his time in the LAPD. Now he's a chaplain in a neighboring agency where I have several friends, and I couldn't be happier that he's there. Now, your police chaplain might be a boring civilian like me, but don't assume. He or she might have a lifetime of valuable experience, which you would never expect. I also want to reiterate a point that Ward made. Integrity is something that you can't get back once you've lost it. And compromised integrity is more likely to end a law enforcement career than perhaps any other single cause. But I also want to give you a word of encouragement. Today is always the best day to start doing the right thing. If you've been compromised, or you've been lazy, or you've just been in a funk, reset yourself and start doing the right thing today. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
It might be literally giving a younger officer the wrong information about how to make an arrest or something like that. And then when they mess up, you go, I had to jump in there and stop him. He did it again.
They're creating supervisory work for themselves.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, I'm going to purposefully trip up this rookie so that I can be the one to come in and correct them.
And I've seen it so many times.
When the rookie might not have messed up.
Right.
Yeah.
Just doing what they thought was right. Which, in fairness, you are responsible for your own self. But if you call your sergeant, you're going to expect to get the right information, or at least have him say, "Oops, I gave him the wrong information." But no, this is an intentional deal. This is a malicious act.
Yeah, they're undermining them on purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is in law enforcement, think about how dangerous that is and how many terrible things happen because of that. So what happens when the sergeant keeps putting out these fires and keeps correcting all these dumb rookies that keep making these mistakes, and he's just so good at it. He's just always seems to be there and always seems to catch them. Well, what do lieutenants and captains think? Yeah. They think he's doing a great job. They'll talk about him in the captain's meetings. They'll talk about him with the chief and say, "Hey, this guy's doing a great job of catching these dumb kids. I don't know what we'd do without him or her."
This show is always and forever ad-free because listeners like you send support at buymeacoffee.com/HeyChaplain. thank you for giving $5 when you don't really even have to. It means the world to me. The views expressed here are the personal views of the hosts and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. And thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain. And as always, pray for peace in our city.